Since his election in 2010, Mayor Kevin Johnson has dominated the Sacramento region like no other local political figure. The Johnson era has been defined by miracle achievements, like rescuing the Sacramento Kings, and by past controversies. Mayor Johnson has announced that this will be his last term. What's next for the region, and what does Sacramento without Kevin Johnson as mayor look like? Here to talk about that and more is the Sacramento Bee's Marcos Breton. He joins me next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
So what happened, Marcos?
What happened was a videotape, almost 20 years old, was released by a website called Deadspin. The website usually focuses on sports news. They're taking a great interest in Mayor Johnson. And the videotape was of a teenage girl making horrible accusations about then NBA star Kevin Johnson. And it was the release of that videotape and hearing these accusations and seeing the slight young girl making them that caused ESPN at the 11th hour to pull a documentary about Sacramento's effort to keep the Kings from relocating. Those of us who had seen the film thought it was the greatest advertisement for Sacramento ever done, with Kevin Johnson at the center of the film. And ESPN, because of the videotape, because they're a visual medium, they were scared off from releasing the film, and that created a national story that could not be ignored. So it was one grainy VHS piece of videotape, in my estimation, that effectively ended Kevin Johnson's political career.
I know that over the years, this particular story had been covered before. Mm-hmm. What was significantly new about this revelation that was different than all the stuff that came up over the past several years, and particularly in this first election?
So nothing and everything. In 2008, these allegations came to the forefront. And I know that, because I was in the middle of it, that the Sacramento Bee covered it extensively. For weeks at a time, we had links to the police report compiled by the Phoenix Police in the 90s. And any of our readers could have clicked the link and read the report themselves. So that wasn't different. None of this was different. What was different was that there was a piece of video that actually gave voice to these allegations. Unproved allegations. Unprosecuted allegations, but it gave voice to these allegations, and it caused a major media company to make a decision that created a story and caused the New York Times, Esquire magazine, any number of other national publications to focus on Mayor Johnson and Sacramento. And many people in town will say, well, why did the media ignore the story? We didn't. We haven't. And none of the accusations have changed. What changed was a film that was done about Sacramento that was very complimentary was pulled because the media outlet ESPN became nervous about releasing this film. And I'm speculating at this point, but potentially fearing that other people would come forward and make accusations.
Because of the recent experience that's happened with celebrities like Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby is the name that is often mentioned by people who don't like Mayor Kevin Johnson. In my opinion, those are very reckless, irresponsible comparisons. No one ever accused Mayor Kevin Johnson of drugging and raping anyone. And the accusations that were levied against Mayor Johnson were not made years after statutes of limitations had expired. They were made in the moment, and they were investigated. And I had to take a step back as someone who covered this, and I reread the entire Phoenix police report for the first time since 2008. And when I did, it was like a revelation to me again as to why we covered this story the way we did. Those of us in mainstream journalism, when we follow the rules of fairness and corroboration. When you read the report, Mayor Johnson denies every single claim in there, and he has consistently done so. And so the Phoenix authorities determined, because there was no physical evidence, there were no witnesses, and because the suspect himself denied all the way through, there was nothing to prosecute. He was never charged, arrested, or convicted of anything. He is convicted in the very shaky, shady court of public opinion by some people. But that's a completely different story. That's what the mayor has been contending with, is in this internet age where information passes so quickly and people make very irresponsible judgments on social media. That's what he's been contending with. But those of us who've covered the story, it's the same story. There were allegations, they were denied, they were never proved, and that's the end of it. And nothing about that has changed.
Well, Mayor Johnson has had national and international focus on him since his election as mayor, not only for becoming mayor at the time when Forbes said that Sacramento was a more miserable place to live than Detroit, but also obviously for the King saga, but things that are even unrelated, like his presidency of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and also his actions during the controversy related to the L.A. Clippers owner in the past.
Yes.
And with all of that notoriety, with all of that focus, is it at all noteworthy that this comes out at this particular time?
You know, I've been asked a lot about the timing of it. If there was any timing involved or any urgency involved by the website that released the video, it was the ESPN film. Now, that's a guess on my part. We don't know for sure. In my business, in the news business, almost every story has a trail of questions in its wake, and people wonder about the timing of things. Sometimes I laugh. I think if people knew how much we fly by the seat of our pants, they would laugh when they realize that there weren't these grand conspiracy theories. This is a different media entity. I don't know what their motivation was, but it certainly was interesting that ESPN pulled the film hours before it was going to be premiered right here in Sacramento.
What do you think of that decision?
I've been asked about that. It's a good question. And people wondered if there was meaning to it. I think there was, but I think the meaning wasn't what people thought. The meaning as I saw it was ESPN was concerned about its brand, and they could care less about Sacramento was having this party in town. They didn't care. What they cared about was their brand, and they had made a decision over a series of days, and when they made the decision, whatever else was going on was irrelevant to them. And it was a shame and surreal to be at the Crest Theater in downtown Sacramento, purple carpet, floodlights, all these, trappings of a celebration, and it was all undermined by this story that had just broken. The audience that I saw the film with was still very pro-mayor and was chanting his name as he left the theater, of a film that the rest of the country may never see again. And if that's not an interesting symbol to ponder in Sacramento, I don't know what is.
What's interesting to me about that is that I had the opportunity several months ago to see a rough cut of the film. And I was asked by a colleague what was my reaction to it, and I thought it was probably the best snapshot of Sacramento that I had ever seen professionally produced. And so it's a bit of a shame
It is.
whether that becomes a commonly held view or not, that people won't get a chance to make their own judgment.
It is a shame. I think it's a terrible shame because everything in that film was true. Mayor Kevin Johnson really did lead the effort to prevent the Kings from being relocated. Mayor Kevin Johnson really did have the contacts with the National Basketball Association, with the National Basketball Association owners, with leaders of industry. He had the ability to put together an ownership group, a tremendous ownership group on the fly, and rally Sacramento to the cause that people thought was lost. So, and by the way, the entire community, not the entire community, but large segments of the community jumped on board and believed and were positive. And that effort to me was so significant because it was a departure from the Sacramento that often rears its head, a Sacramento of negativity, of small-mindedness, of not believing that things were possible. Kevin Johnson believed that things were possible, and he did it. And it was breathtaking to watch and to be in the middle of. And so, having seen the film capture that whole spirit, it is a terrible shame when you consider that the rest of the country may never see that.
Now, in talking about the film, and you talk about the negativity that typically asserts itself in Sacramento, I call it the faux sophistication.
Yes.
That people sometimes within the region historically have said nothing will ever work in that way because they're usually not wrong because no one makes an effort to do anything. You see, I told you so, aren't I smart?
Right.
And that this was a case where the community was too stupid to know that it was beaten in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that triumph, for many people, believe that it changed the mentality of Sacramento to be one of possibility rather than resignation.
It did, and people felt good about that effort. There is a segment of our population that says, well, the king, they should have been allowed to leave. And it's always been my opinion that people who say that have never really thought through the implications. The implications would have been, we would have lost the most recognizable brand in Sacramento. We would have lost control of the Sleep Train Arena and the land around it because it would have been owned by a billionaire in Seattle who didn't give a damn about Sacramento, and the downtown would still be a pit. And Sacramento would be known as the city that lost its national sports team after losing all these other businesses in the years before during the Great Recession.
While I agree with you, I guess I take it from a different perspective, Marcos, and that is this, is that for me, the Kings themselves are, as an entity, were less relevant than the exercise in the region coming together around a moonshot type idea and actually seeing it through to completion. And the level of confidence that generated, I think, was, whether it was the Kings or something else, it happened to be the Kings, ends up being the important pivot point that was established for the region.
And I would agree completely with that it made people believe and feel good about their city. And those are important emotions for cities to feel. If you look at other cities in America, Philadelphia, for example, Philadelphia experienced urban renewal and turned a corner when people began feeling good about the city and the downtown. And I think that needed to happen in Sacramento. And Kevin Johnson exuded optimism. And he has made people feel good about the city. And he's presided over a period of time where we have seen a renaissance of young developers, of young business people, the music scene, beer and wine, and a
and food.
And
even
food.
Though you and I aren't supposed to be eating anymore.
We can't eat the way we want to. All of these things have come to the forefront, and Mayor Johnson was a big promoter of all those things. And so I hope as we move forward that we don't lose that, because it would be easy.
Well,
to
let's
lose
talk.
that.
Let's talk about that. So, parlor game, which is you look at Kevin Johnson, and whether you like him or hate him, okay, a huge presence. I don't know of another local politician that's dominated Sacramento the way that he has ever, at least in my lifetime here in Sacramento. That being said, there are very few people who can pick up the phone and call the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and get them to come to Sacramento, or a major celebrity to come to Sacramento. Kevin Johnson had that ability. Now, he has been employing that ability, one with the Kings, but also in terms of economic development, not just for Sacramento, but regionally and working with other players in the region. Who is capable of the people that are usually talked about of filling those shoes?
There's no one I can think of right now who can fill those particular shoes, which is the concern going forward. There are people who can talk about homelessness. There are even people who can talk about economic development in Sacramento, but there isn't anyone who can bring the skill set, the charisma, and the Rolodex that the mayor had, and the ability to draw people to the city. And I've seen him in action. I was on the East Coast with him, with the mayor, in the spring when the film, ESPN film, was premiered. And I saw him in action working for Sacramento with national media types, with sort of captains of industry, and using his access to promote the city and the region. And that was very valuable, and that's been very valuable for Sacramento. And it is lamentable that he won't be in that mayor's chair to continue that work, because there still is a lot to do. Sacramento is still sort of a city right on the verge, and we haven't crossed over into an area where we can say, well, we've changed our economic ecosystem. We haven't. We'd like to, but we haven't. And the mayor has laid the groundwork for that by bringing in Barry Broom and by energizing local CEOs, but that work is still undone.
I would also say he's done so because of the fact that, and it's one of the things that probably has caused him problems, is that he doesn't mind being criticized by those who don't share his particular beliefs. So he's not stunted in his action. That being said, we are going to be moving into a new era, post Kevin Johnson. What are the attributes that he brought to the table that this region needs to be looking for in terms of preserving, in order to build on the work that's commonly accepted as having moved this region forward?
So Mayor Johnson, when he was at his best, he led through optimism. He was not concerned about being criticized. Very rare for Sacramento. I
think that's part of our state government mentality.
It is. He was not, would not adhere to the rules of these little nettlesome political groups, cliques in town. In fact, he came to power as the antidote to all those things. And part of the reason that some people disliked him so much is that he jumped to the front of the line. There had been a line arranged by previous mayors and city council members, lines of ascension, that were very anti-democratic, and they were never criticized for that. And the mayor said, no way. And he jumped to the front of the line and blew them all out of the water. And that created enemies in town that never went away. People who are...
including some members of his own party, particularly the party establishment.
Yes, establishment. And we're talking about people who've done nothing for the benefit of Sacramento except stand to one side and criticize. And so when Mayor Johnson would not be cowed and would not adhere, I think he picked up admirers, myself included. And so when he was at his best, he led through optimism and refused to buy into the negativity that is so much a part of Sacramento politics. And my fear is, going forward, is that we have someone elected who is more in the mainstream of Sacramento politics and who is ground down eventually by the negative voices, where Kevin Johnson was like a fortress. He was impervious to all of the little paper cuts that you can get when you're in politics here in town. He refused to adhere to those things.
When Kevin Johnson was not at his best, though, what are the attributes that you would hope that the next occupant of that office would hold, not just for the benefit of the city of Sacramento, but the region itself, that would make that work even more potent?
It's a great question. And there was always a chasm between what Kevin Johnson was and what I wish he was. What I wish he had been and what I think the next mayor has to bring is a more mature assessment of the landscape, and a realization that even someone who can annoy you tremendously can be helpful to you, and someone who can be a little more adept, or a lot more adept, at building coalitions to get things done.
When you say that, do you have in your mind's eye an example of what sort of embodies that concern?
I do. You mean in terms of Mayor Kevin Johnson when he failed? Well, the biggest example is when he tried to change the rules to give more power to the mayor's position, and it was always framed. He always framed it in a way where it sort of screamed self-interest, and he needed to have someone else sort of carry. He needed to trust someone else to carry that water for him. And he needed to make a better argument that would appeal to the voters. And instead it was like civics class 101, and it was very naive. I supported that effort because I still believe that Sacramento would be better served by an executive mayor, but his persona just trampled the entire effort. And he was allowed to be brought down by the more negative elements of Sacramento politics. And so perhaps someone with the ability to take the longer view of things and the trust to have other people in Sacramento shine so that ultimately you win as well, I think that would be a great element or a great goal for the next mayor to strive for.
So let's look at the future. Whoever gets into office, what needs to be at the top of the agenda?
In my opinion, the next mayor needs to say this, needs to say, I acknowledge fully that homelessness is a very important issue in Sacramento, but it's not the most important issue. We're going to best address homelessness, affordable housing, services by growing our economy, period. And it's in everyone's interest for Sacramento to be in a stronger position the next time the economy tanks. We can't rely on home sales or any other of these gimmicks that propped up our economy before. And so the work being done by people like Barry Broom, who was brought into Sacramento by Kevin Johnson, needs to succeed. And I still don't know if there is an acknowledgement among sort of some of the smarter people in Sacramento. I don't know that they acknowledge that as fully as they should of how important that is to Sacramento. We need to grow our local economy and continue creating the enthusiasm for investment that was laid, that the groundwork was laid by Kevin Johnson.
I would reframe your statement in our final moments a different way.
Of course you would.
Which is, it's a outwardly looking, future sort of focused vision of Sacramento versus one that is inwardly focused and more around the preservation of small neighborhoods
Yes.
and sort of the way that things have been done here for the past 50, 80,
Right.
90 years. Just for you, as a Sacramentan and someone who follows this, if there's one trend or one thing that we should be looking to in the next couple of months as to which way things are moving, what would it be?
Well, obviously I've stated my bias already. The trend would be who the business community rallies behind in this race. And my hope is that there will be consensus among key leaders. So before there was Mayor Kevin Johnson, there was this annoying question that was always asked in Sacramento: where's our leadership? In my opinion, what I've written in the column often is leadership begins when you look in the mirror, okay?
And we're going to have to leave it there.
So look in the mirror and rally behind the business community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's our show. Thanks to our guest and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.